Hi, my name is Prerak Sharma. I am first year student of MBA Data Science and AI at IIT Mandi. So, continuing with the series part, today also I'll be reading this Steve Jobs book for 20 minutes. So, without wasting much time, let's start. So, one day, Jobs called Joanne Simpson, said who he was and arranged to come down to Los Angeles to meet her. He later claimed it was mainly out of curiosity. I believe in environment more than heredity in determining your traits. But still, you have to wonder a little about your biological roots, he said. He also wanted to reassure Joanne that what she had done was all right. I wanted to meet my biological mother, mostly to see if she was okay and thank her because I'm glad I didn't end up as an abortion. She was 23 and she went through a lot to help me. Joanne was overcome with emotion when Jobs arrived. When Jobs arrived at a place, at a Los Angeles house, she knew he was famous and rich, but she wasn't actually sure why. She immediately began to pour out her emotions. She had been pressured to sign the papers putting him up for abortion, she said, and did so only when told that he was happy in the house. Told it only if he was happy in the house of his new parents. She had always missed him and suffered about what she had done. She apologized over and over, even as Jobs kept reassuring that he understood and that things had turned out just fine. Once she calmed down, she told Jobs that he had a full sister, Mona Simpson, who was then an aspiring novelist in Manhattan. She had never told Mona that she had a brother, and that day she broke the news, or at least part of it by telephone. You have a brother, and he's wonderful and he's famous, and I'm going to bring him to New York so you can meet him. She said Mona was in the throes of finishing a novel, but about her mother and their peregrination from Wisconsin to Los Angeles, anywhere but here. Those who have read it will not be surprised that Joanne was somewhat quirky in the way she imparted to Mona the news about her brother. She refused to say who he was, only that he had been poor, had gotten richer, was good looking and famous, but long, dark hair, and lived in California. Mona then worked at the Paris Review, George Plimpton's literary journal, housed on the ground floor of his townhouse near Manhattan's East River. She had and her co-workers began a guessing game on who her brother might be. John Travolta, that was one of the favorite guesses. Other actors were also hot prospects. And one point, someone did toss out guess that's maybe it's one of those guys who started the Apple computer, but no one could recall their names. The meeting occurred in the lobby of the St. Regis Hotel. He was totally straightforward and lovely, just a normal and sweet guy, Mona recalled. They all sat and talked for a few minutes. Then he took his sister for a long walk, just the two of them. Jobs was thrilled to find that he had a sibling who was so similar to him. They were both intense in their artistry, observant of their surroundings, and sensitive yet strong willed. When they went to the dinner tonight together, they noticed the same architectural details and talked about them excitedly afterwards. My sister's a writer, he exulted to colleagues at Apple when he found out. When Plimpton threw a party for Anywhere But Here in late 1986, Jobs flew to New York to accompany Mona to it. They grew increasingly close, though their friendship had the complexities that might be expected considering who they were and how they had come together. Mona was not completely thrilled at first to have me in her life and have a mother so emotionally affectionate towards me. Not completely thrilled at first to have me in her life and have a mother so emotionally affectionate towards me. He later said, as we got to know each other, we really became good friends, and she is my family. I don't know what I do without her. I can't imagine a better sister. My adopted sister, Patty, and I were never close. Mona likewise developed a deep affection for him and at times could be very protective, although she would later write an edgy novel about him, a regular guy, that described his quirks with discomforting accuracy. One of the few things they would argue about was the clothes. She dressed like a struggling novelist, and he would berate her for not wearing clothes that were fitting enough. At one point, his comments so annoyed her that she wrote him a letter. I am a young writer, and this is my life, and I'm not trying to be a model anyway. He didn't answer. But shortly after, a box arrived from the store of Issei Miyake, the Japanese fashion designer whose stark and technology influenced style made him one of Jobs' favorite. He'd gone shopping for me, she later said, and he'd picked out great things, exactly my size in flattering colors. There was one pantsuit that he had particularly liked, and the shipment included three of them, all identical. I still remember those first suits I sent Mona. They were linen pants and tops in pale greyish green that looked beautiful with her reddish hair. The lost father. In the meantime, Mona Simpson had been trying to track down their father, who had wandered off when she was 5. Through Ken Auletta and Nick Pileggi, prominent Manhattan writers, she was introduced to a retired New York cop who had formed his own detective agency. I paid him what little money I had, Simpson recalled, but the research was unsuccessful. Then she met another private eye in California who was able to find an address for Abdul Fattah Janrali in Sacramento through a Department of Motor Vehicle search. Simpson told her brother and flew out from New York to see the man who was apparently their father. Jobs had no interest in meeting him. He didn't treat me well, he later explained. I don't hold anything against him. I'm happy to be alive. But what bothers me most is that he didn't treat Mona well. He abandoned her. Jobs himself had abandoned his own illegitimate daughter, Lisa, and now was trying to restore their relationship. But that complexity did not soften his feeling towards Jandali. Simpson went to Sacramento alone. It was very intense. Simpson recalled. She found her father working in a small restaurant. He seemed happy to see her, yet oddly passive about the entire situation. They talked for a few hours, and he recounted that after he left Wisconsin, he had drifted away from teaching and gotten into the restaurant business. Jobs had asked Simpson not to mention him, so she didn't. But at one point, her father casually remarked that he and her mother had another baby, boy, before she had been born. What happened to him? She asked. He replied, "We'll never see that baby again. That baby's gone." Simpson recoiled but said nothing. An even more astonishing revelation occurred when Jindali was describing the previous restaurant that he had run. There had been some nice ones, he insisted, fancier than the Sacramento joint they were sitting in. He told her somewhat emotionally that he wished she could have seen him when he was managing a Mediterranean restaurant north of San Jose. That was a wonderful place, he said. All of the successful technology people who used to come there. Even Steve Jobs. Simpson was stunned. Oh yeah, he used to come in and he was a sweet guy and a big tipper, her father added. Mona was able to refrain from blurting out Steve Jobs' son. When the visit was over, she called Jobs surreptitiously from the payphone at the restaurant and arranged to meet him at the Espresso Roma cafe in Berkeley. Adding to the personal and family drama, he brought along Lisa, now in grade school, who lived with her mother, Grisanne. When they all arrived at the cafe, it was close to 10 p.m., and Simpson poured forth detail. George was understandably astonished when she mentioned the restaurant near San Jose. He could recall being there and even meeting the man who was his biological father. It was amazing, he later said of the revelation. I had been to that restaurant a few times and I remember meeting the owner. He was Syrian balding. We shook hands. Nevertheless, Job still had no desire to see him. I was a wealthy man, but then, and I didn't trust him not to try to blackmail me or go to press about it. He recalled somewhat unfairly as he did not know Jindali. I asked Mona not to tell him about me. She never did. But years later, Jindali saw his relationship to Job mentioned online. Listed Jindali as a father, reference book, Job's father as well. By then, Jindali was married for a fourth time and working as a food and beverage manager at Boomtown Resort and Casino just west of Reno, Nevada. When he brought his new wife Russell to visit Simpson in 2006, he raised the topic. What is this thing about Steve Jobs? He asked. She confirmed the story but added that she thought Jobs had no interest in meeting him. Just Jindali seemed to accept that. My father is thoughtful and a beautiful storyteller, but he is very, very passive, Simpson said. He never contacted Steve. Simpson turned her search for Jindali into a basis for a second novel, Lost Father, published in 1992. Jobs convinced Paul Rand, the designer who did the next logo, to design the cover, but according to Simpson, it was god awful and we never used it. She also tracked down various members of the Jindali family in homes and in America, and in 2011 was writing a novel about Syrian roots. The Syrian ambassador in Washington threw dinner for her that included a cousin and his wife, who then lived in Florida and had flown up for the occasion. Simpson assumed that Jobs would eventually meet Jindali, but as time went on, he showed even less interest. In 2010, when Jobs and his son Reed went to a birthday dinner for Simpson at her Los Angeles house, Reed spent some time looking at pictures of his biological father, but Jobs ignored them. Nor did he seem to care about his Syrian heritage. When the Middle East would come up in conversation, the topic did not engage him or evoke his typical strong opinions, even after Syria was swept up into the 2011 Arab Spring upstrings. I don't think anybody really knows what we should be doing over there, he said when I asked whether the Obama administration should be intervening more in Egypt, Libya, and Syria. You're fucked if you do, and you're fucked if you don't. Jobs did retain a friendly relationship with his biological mother, Joanne Simpson. Over the years, she and Mona would often spend Christmas at Jobs' house. The visitors could be sweet, but also emotionally draining. Juan would sometimes break into tears, say how much she had loved him, and apologize for giving him up. It turned out all right. Jobs would reassure her. As he told her one Christmas, "Don't worry, I had a great childhood and I turned out okay." Lisa. Brennan, however, did not have a great childhood. When she was young, her father almost never came to see her. "I didn't want to be a father, so I wasn't," Job later said, with only a touch of remorse in his voice, yet occasionally he felt the tug. One day when Lisa was 3, Jobs was driving near the house he had brought for her and Christian, and he decided to stop. Lisa didn't know who he was. He sat on the doorstep, now venturing inside, and talked to Christian. The scene was repeated once or twice every year. Jaws would come by unannounced, talk little about Lisa's school options or other issues, then drive off in his Mercedes. But by the time Lisa turned 8 in 1986, the visits were occurring more frequently. Jobs was no longer immersed in the grueling push to create the Macintosh or in the subsequent power struggles with Scully he was at next, which was calmer, friendlier, and headquartered in Palo Alto, near where Chrisanne and Lisa lived. In addition, by the time she was in third grade, it was clear that Lisa was a smart and artistic kid who had already been singled out by her teachers for her writing ability. She was spunky and high spirited and had a little of her father's defiant attitude. She also looked a bit like him, with arched eyebrows and a faintly Middle Eastern angularity. One day, to the surprise of his colleagues, he brought her by the office. As she turned eight wheels in the corner, she squealed, "Look at me." Avi Tivanian, a lanky and gregarious engineer at Next, who had become Job's friend, remembers that every now and then when they were going out to dinner, they would stop by Chrisanne's house to pick up Lisa. He was very sweet to her, Tivanian recalled. He was a vegetarian, and so was Chrisanne, but she wasn't. He was fine with that. He suggested that she order chicken, and she did. Eating chicken became her little indulgence as she shuttled between two parents who were vegetarian with a spiritual regard for natural foods. We bought our groceries, our pantarilla, quinoa, celeriac, carob covered nuts in yeasty smelling stores where the women didn't dye the hair. She later wrote about her time with the mother. But Well, we sometimes tasted foreign treats. A few times we bought a hot seasoned chicken from a gourmet shop with rows and rows of chickens turning on spits and ate it in the car from the foil lined paper bag with her fingers. Her father, whose dietary fixations came in fantastic ways, was more fastidious about what he ate. She watched him spit out a mouthful of soup one day after learning that it contained butter. After loosening up a bit while at Apple, he was back at being strict vegan. Even at a young age, Lisa began to realize his diet obsession reflected a life philosophy, one in which asceticism and minimalism could heighten subsequent sensations. He believed that great harvests come from arid sources, pleasure from restraint, she noted. He knew the equations that most people didn't know. Things led to their opposites. In a similar way, the absence and coldness of her father made his occasional moments of warmth so much more intensely gratifying. I didn't live with him, but he would stop by our house some days, a deity among us for a few tingling moments of ours, she recalled. Lisa soon became interesting enough that he would take walks with her. He would also go rollerblading with her on the quiet streets of old Palo Alto, often stopping at the house of Anna Hoffman and Andy Hertzfield. The first time he brought her around to see Hoffman, he just knocked on the door and announced, "This is Lisa." Hoffman knew right away it was obvious she was his daughter. She told me, "Nobody has the joy, it's a signature joy." Hoffman, who suffered from not knowing her own divorced father until she was 10, encouraged Jobs to be a better father. He followed her advice and later thanked her for it. Once he took Lisa on a business trip to Tokyo, and they stayed at the sleek and businesslike Okura Hotel. At the elegant downstairs sushi bar, Jobs ordered large trays of Yunaga sushi, a dish he loved so much that he allowed the warm cocktail to pass muster as vegetarian. The pieces were coated with fine salt or a thin sweet sauce, and Lisa remembered later that they dissolved in her mouth. So too did the distance between them. As she later wrote, "It was the first time I'd felt with him so relaxed and content over those trays of meat. The excess, the permission and warmth after the cold salads meant a once inaccessible space had opened. He was less rigid with himself, even human under the great ceilings with the little chair with me and the meat. But it was not always sweetness and light. Jobs was as mercurial with Lisa as he was with almost everyone, cycling between embrace and abandonment. On one visit, he would be playful, on the next, he would be cold. Often, he was not there at all. She was always unsure of their relationship. According to Hostel, I went to a birthday party of hers, and Steve was supposed to come, but he was very, very late. She got extremely anxious and disappointed, but when he finally came, she totally lit up. Lisa learned to be temperamental in return. Over the years, their relationship would be a roller coaster, with each of the low points elongated by the sheer stubbornness. After failing out, they could go for months not speaking to each other. Neither one was good at reaching out, apologizing, or making the effort to heal. Even when he was wrestling with repeated health problems, one day, the fall of 2010, he was wistfully going through a box of old snapshots with me and paused over one that showed him visiting Lisa when she was young. I probably didn't go over there enough, he said. Since he had not spoken to her all that year, I asked if he might want to reach out to her with a call or email. He looked at me blankly for a moment, then went back to riffling through her old photographs. The romantic, when it came to the women, Jobs could be deeply romantic. He tended to fall in love dramatically, share with friends every up and down of a relationship, and pine in public whenever he was away from his current girlfriend. In the summer of 1983, he went to a small dinner party in Silicon Valley with Juan Baez and sat next to an undergraduate at the University of Pennsylvania named Jennifer again, who was not quite sure who he was. By then, he and Baez had realized that they weren't destined to be forever young together, and Jobs himself fascinated again, who was working on a San Francisco weekly during a summer vacation. He tracked her down, gave her a call, and took her at Cafe Jacqueline, a little bistro near Telegraph Hill that specialized in vegetarian souffles. They dated for a year, and Jobs often flew east to visit her. At a Boston Macworld event, he told a large gathering how much in love he was, and thus needed to rush out to catch a plane for Philadelphia to see his girlfriend. The audience was enchanted. When he was visiting New York, she would take the train up, stay with him at the Carriel or at J. Crash's Upper East Side apartment, and they would often eat at Cafe Luxembourg, visit repeatedly. The apartment in the San Remo he was planning to remodel and go to movies or the operas. He and Edgar Egan also spoke for hours on the phone many nights. One topic they wrestled with was his belief which came from his Buddhist studies, and it was important to avoid attachment to material objects. Our consumer desires are unhealthy, he told her, and to attain enlightenment, you need to develop a life of non attachment and non materialism. He even sent her a tape of Kobun Chino, his then teacher, lecturing about the problems caused by craving and obtaining things. Egan pushed back. Wasn't he defying their philosophy, she asked, by making a pewter and other products the people coveted? He was irritated by the dichotomy, and we had exuberant debates about it, Egan recalled. In the end, Jobs' pride in the objects he made overcame his sensibility that people should eschew being attached to such possessions. When the Macintosh came out in January 1984, Again was staying at her mother's apartment in San Francisco during a winter break from Penn. Her mother's dinner guests were astonished one night when Steve Jobs, suddenly very famous, appeared at the door carrying a freshly boxed Macintosh and proceeded to Egan's bedroom to set it up. Jobs' pride in the objects made him he made overcame his sensibility that people should eschew being attached to such possessions. When the Macintosh came out in January 1984, Again was staying at her mother's apartment in San Francisco during a winter break from Penn. Her mother's dinner guests were astonished one night when Steve Jobs, suddenly very famous, appeared at the door carrying a freshly boxed Macintosh and proceeded to Edgin's bedroom to set it up. Jobs told it again, as he had few other friends, about his premonition that he would not live a long life. That was why he was driven and impatient, he confided. He felt a sense of urgency about all he wanted to get done. Egan later said the relationship tapered off by the fall of 1984, when Egan made it clear that she was still far too young to think of getting married. Shortly after that, just as turmoil with Scully was beginning to build at Apple in the early 1985, Jobs was heading to a meeting when he stopped at the office of a guy who was working with the Apple Foundation, which helped get computers to non-profit organizations. Sitting in his office was a lithe, very blonde woman who combined a hippie aura of natural purity with the solid sensibilities of a computer consultant. Her name was Tina Ritz. She was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, Jobs recalled. He called her the next day and asked her to dinner. She said no, that she was living with a boyfriend. A few days later, he took her on a walk to a nearby park and again asked her out. And the time she told her boyfriend that she wanted to go, She was very honest and open. After dinner, she started to cry because she knew her life was about to be disrupted, and it was. Within a few months, she had moved into the unfurnished mansion and would say she was the first person I was truly in love with. Job later said, "We had a very deep connection. I don't know that anyone will ever understand me better than she did." So, guys, I'm done with it. I reached 263 page of Steve Jobs' book. I currently have a meeting to attend, so I'll continue tomorrow. Do like, share, and comment your views below. Till then, signing off, Prerak Sharma.